Good. Just click OK.
I can't. I have to click got it.
All right, got it. Works. Yeah, so I do want to start off tonight with, yes, we do have tornadoes potentially in the forecast. And so I live out in the country. And what I will tell you is we could potentially lose power. If we lose power, do not try and reconnect. I will just continue to record because the laptop will still go, but I'll lose my internet for a while. And I will then send a link out for everybody to kind of watch, and I'll go through the motions so that you can still see, you can still experience just everything. It won't be as interactive. And we'll kind of pick up on some of that next time. This first one isn't going to be anywhere near as long as future ones are. Our goal is that they should take about an hour and a half, but they might stretch to 2 if there's a ton of questions or if there's a lot of people talking about the case studies back and forth and that sort of thing. So I always want to make sure that you're aware. Okay, and then the first thing would be, thank you again for doing this. I know I put that in the first one that you all saw on Jotform. However, next we would do breaking the ice, but with those of us that know each other all being here, we don't need to stop there. So give everybody a few minutes back of their time. Let's see. Questions. I want to let everybody know that even when we're doing this, there'll be some videos that we'll be watching. There'll be case studies that we're going through. It's still okay when you're doing the pre-work or even during this interactive session, ask the question. I'm not offended. Break in, raise your hand, do what you need to do. Devontae helps me monitor all that in the background if I miss something. They can also be emailed to me if you would prefer to do that. Let's see. The next thing that I want to talk about is expectations and group norms and group agreements. So what that is, a lot of people aren't familiar, but like these are kind of like the spoken rules that we'll have to how we're going to interact and things like that. Typically, they're things like be honest, be respectful, be mindful of other people's opinions, things like that. Since we don't have a large group here, we will probably add a little bit of this to the beginning of next time. Doug, you got an extra homework assignment that others will also get as they watch this. Think of what you think one of them should be, and we will go over them for next time. Okay, these are some of the ones we've used in the past, just to give you an idea. Respect each other and others' opinions. No question is stupid, because if you don't understand some of the basics, it's going to be harder to understand some of the things when we build on them. Be open-minded. As you may or may not know, some people have different opinions than others, and that is okay. We want to be at least listen to what they have to say and consider it. Be aware of the time that you use to share. There's every once in a while, there's this one person that wants to talk and tell like 20-minute long stories. And that's not a good use of everybody's time. We want to be mindful of that. And then participate, because sitting back and just watching it happen is not going to be as valuable as participating. All right. All right, you ready? We're going to practice technology, Doug. First thing we're going to do is I'm going to launch a poll question for you and Devontae to answer. I can probably tell what his is going to be. All right. So you should see the question right now. First training poll. And if you scroll down below the picture, you'll have some choices. Okay. And now I'm going to share the results, and you should see the results. And one of you picked morning and one of you picked midday. All right. See, super easy. Now, what you should be able to do is I've ended the poll and I've stopped sharing the results. You should be able to just get rid of that or click off of it or click close. Look at that. I will say that we all know that I am a very early morning person. It is not uncommon for me to be emailing by 7 a.m., if not sooner. Which adds to the fact that the time we get to this point in time of the day, I've been up since 3 o'clock in the morning. So words become very difficult for me to speak. So I ask for some grace with that because sometimes I struggle a little bit. I am not at 100% at this point in the day. I think everybody's familiar. We'll try a breakout room later. I want to go over the schedule again, though. So our weeks begin on a Tuesday. We ask you to try and get your pre-work done by Sunday night. Now, you don't have to worry about actually emailing it to me. Make a note. This is where we go through, and I notice everything, and we fix little glitches here. You don't have to email it. It emails to me directly, but if there was something you needed to email, for instance, the very last week, there will be something for you to email. Please try to get it to me on a Sunday night. The reason for that is I will ideally see it on a Monday. And then I have time to work with it on Monday. Many Tuesdays, as you know, I am in Abilene for court 2 Tuesdays a month, and other meetings and things get put on Tuesdays a lot in other counties. So I want to make sure I have enough time to go over everything and be prepared the next day. All right.
My memory was that at the bottom of that pre-work, there was a submit button.
There was.
Okay.
And all you have to do is hit submit. It came to me. It also goes to Devontae for him to track. And I saw yours come through, no problems.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons why we like using the format. And I do want to say, did you have any issues using that format?
The only question I had was that there was quite a bit of time involved, and I don't know. Well, I did it in 2 phases, but I had to re-enter some stuff because when I pulled it up the second time, there was nothing saved.
Okay.
I don't know if I missed a button or something.
No, but there's a button that we should be able to do just like our monthly reports that actually save it. So save doc. Thank you for letting me know. I appreciate that. That is something that we can, there should be just a couple of buttons we have to click over here, and then your work would be saved, because that's the idea, is that you should be able to work on it as you go.
Yeah, great, thanks.
And then the other thing is, ideally, it would come out even a couple of days earlier than yours did, so that there would be a couple extra days for that. So, all right. I would say check your emails. Sometimes if things change, anything can happen. Everything can happen sometimes. I did have one time that we didn't have power, and my backup internet, which I usually have, didn't work either. And so I couldn't get it to work. There was another time that the presentation is actually saved on our work computer, and the work computer went down because the Pinnell building lost power, and their backup servers didn't allow for the remote access at that point. So things can happen. I will typically send out an email and let everybody know. I can't wait to get beyond this week when I don't have to talk so much. Okay, so today we're going to be working on some skills and competencies, some volunteer dilemmas, which are always interesting. We're going to talk a little bit briefly against abuse and neglect again, and then we're going to start actually working a case, and we'll talk about what happens next. So the first question that I would want to ask, and Devontae, please feel free to answer this as well. What surprised you most when you were doing the reading and learning about the key laws of the child welfare system?
How complicated all of it is.
Yeah, I had forgotten that there were that many acts. And, I knew some of this obviously because I've been through this before,
Right?
but I've slept since then. So,
Me too. You and I had the same curriculum, which was the old curriculum, which is completely different. And that impacted, but I am always still struck by how recent it is. This has all happened within my lifetime.
yeah.
And the other thing that I know a lot of people get struck by is that we had laws protecting laws against cruelty to animals before we had laws against cruelty to people.
Yeah, that was an interesting story where the concerned neighbor or whatever it was,
Mm-hmm.
the ASPCA couldn't get
It,
help for a kid.
it's kind of craziness right there. So yes, those are the two things that continually struck me. Devontae, I agree. It is very complicated. I think that is just a matter of bureaucracy. The more we try and make things clean or we add a law to fix it, we don't always realize the implications, and therefore things just get more and more complicated. Um, that's just a personal opinion, though. But there is a lot. Fortunately, you don't have to know the inner details of each law. There are certain things that we will go over in training, especially we'll dig into a little bit more the Indian Child Welfare Act and ICWA and a couple of things like that. And I know I've already started to talk about that federal family first. That's going to come up a couple more times during this training. Additionally, we talked a little bit about FERPA because that's one where, as long as you have what we call a judicial council form that's signed by the judge, you can go into the schools and get access to that kind of information. That's important to know. A lot of these you don't have to know the details of, but you do need to have an understanding of kind of how it all happened. So now we'll talk a little bit more specifically about some of the skills and competencies. And so once again, I want to go over the 7 competencies for volunteer advocates. I have to say that they really love their alliteration. And for some reason, they love the letter C. So the CASA role, what you can and cannot do. That's what I talked about when I did that comparison of what's the social worker's job versus what's our job. Communication, being effectively able to communicate with a wide, diverse group of people. Cultural competence, having understanding of different cultures and subcultures. Sound judgment, being able to define and develop the ability to understand what would be in that child's best interest. Initiative, I know I talked about this before, but like once we get through training, we're there as a support and we're happy to support and we're happy to provide that. But I'm not going to be the one that's saying, hey, did you talk to your child? Hey, did you talk to your child? Did you talk to this person? Did you think about that? I'm not going to micromanage how you do your volunteer work. Foundations of knowledge, that is really understanding the child welfare system, how things work for CASA, how things work in the court system. There's a lot of it. Then there's the one that I'm not so great at, and I freely admit that I'm not so great at the self-care one. Yeah. So, but it is important to take care of yourself. And so what I want to do is normally I would put everybody in breakout rooms of like just 2 people to kind of talk about this. But what do you think is your greatest strength? And what do you think is which one of these competencies do you wish you have a little more room for improvement in?
I guess I like to think I have sound judgment, and I probably could use more cultural competence.
Okay.
And in some cases, even initiative. And when I'm thinking of that, I think in relation to trying to figure out what the heck St. Francis is doing. You know,
Always a good question. Especially since, and I will tell you, I am behind on April's training. There's some more changes that are happening at St. Francis, and so I will be apprising everybody of that. Yes, that's, kind of like what's going on in the case, what's going on there, checking in. Devontae, did you have to?
I'm probably strongest with initiative.
Okay.
And weakest with foundations of knowledge.
Okay. There's a lot to learn, so I think I'm pretty confident. I think my greatest confidence would be in the CASA role. Like, I have a really good understanding of what we can and cannot do and how we can sometimes even behind the scenes make things happen. But like self-care, it's just that is not my best subject. Okay. So let's do something a little bit different now. We're going to face a dilemma. And Devontae, would you read this out loud for us?
As a CASA volunteer, you are on your way to your very first visit with a 9-year-old girl named Susan. Right before you leave, you call the paternal grandfather who is caring for Susan and find out that she just had some teeth pulled and some other dental work done. He mentioned the dentist prescribed some mild painkillers and antibiotics. He already phoned them into the pharmacy, but he doesn't have a car to go get them. Since you passed the pharmacy on the way, he was wondering if you could swing by and pick them up. You think back to training and what you learned about providing transportation. The prescriptions are already paid for. Why not pick up a milkshake too? Susan's mouth is going to be sore from all the dental work, and this would be a great way to start out your relationship as her volunteer. You know the milkshake may be too much, but what do you do?
Okay, don't tell me what you do yet. I am going to launch another poll. It's just been launched. There are 2 questions for you both to go ahead and answer. All right, I'm going to end it and I'm going to share it. And I would say, do you bring a milkshake? You both said no. That would be my inclination. I know that it's going to seem like very little, and it's one of the things that I do need to bring before the board to see if we can raise it up. But we're not allowed to spend more than $50 on our child per year. And a lot of people try and do something for the birthday, or they may go and grab fries or something here or there, or Christmas time. That there is a limit. We are not supposed to be providing. For instance, I did have to at one point have a conversation and have a written conversation with a volunteer, because due to some issues, the agency was not providing what they should. The child lost all their clothes in a move. They lost everything, all their clothes, all their stuff, their school books, everything. And the volunteer, she went out, she bought some, just like a couple of pairs of jeans, a couple of shirts, and some underwear, but it ended up being over $100. And that's not our job. That should have been DCF through St. Francis to do at that time. So please be mindful. The other thing I always say here is milkshakes and dental work do not go together, because one of the first things they usually tell you with dental work is do not use a straw for a while. I'm going to go ahead and kill that. But 2 different answers on the first one. So why would we go pick up the prescription, and why would we not go pick up the prescription?
well, one of the things I realized after I said yes was that Oh, okay, they're already paid for. Okay, so you wouldn't have that problem.
Mm-mm.
And we're not supposed to transport people.
Nope, we're not supposed to transport people. Our program does not do any person
I
transporting.
guess I thought that actually just transporting the prescription that was already paid for would be very helpful.
Okay, so one point in favor of doing it was that it would be very helpful. How about why would we possibly not do that?
Precedent.
Precedent is a good one. That's also precedent is usually one that I also use with the milkshake example. We don't want to set a precedent and have this child expect that we're going to be bringing them a treat every time we come visit. So usually that first one, I'm much more stingy. I also, if I have a little one around that age, you'll hear a lot about Spitfire and some of the cases that I've had over the years. And she was 7, and I didn't start bringing art supplies until 2 or 3 visits in, but I made it very clear that they were art supplies that I would bring with me and then I would collect up again. You know, if she wanted to keep the picture that she made or painted or whatever, that was fine. But that's how I got around the rule a little bit. And it was an activity we could do together, but it wasn't like I went and I bought her all these art supplies and gave them to her. They were something for us to do together. What I would say is my recommendation would be against picking up the prescriptions. Precedent is one part. The other part is if they are any kind of narcotics involved, you have to sign for those at the prescription. And when you sign for that, you are signing that you're not going to use them inappropriately. Well, you have no control whether they get used appropriately or not, since you're not in the home. However, what I would do is I would see if we could arrange either for maybe the prescription place to deliver them. You know, I wouldn't be adverse to calling up the local pharmacy and saying, look, he doesn't have a car right now. The child just had, is there any way, you know, that sort of thing, to see if they could get delivered. Or I would try and contact the social worker. And if we couldn't get a hold of them, we would have at least tried. I would look to see if there was a neighbor that could potentially do it. I would probably help them brainstorm other solutions, but explain that the executive director of the program's a meanie and she said no. There's just a lot of legal liabilities when it comes to prescription medications. So there you go. All right, let's see. So ready for another dilemma? All right, Devontae, you ready to read again, please?
You have developed a great working relationship with Michelle, the birth mother in your case. The case is going well, and there is talk of returning all 4 of her children home. At this time, the agency's only concern is that Michelle's budget is very tight. She will have to maintain employment in order to make ends meet. She has an unsteady employment history and has previously disclosed that she is stressed about the idea of having all 4 children return home at once. One day you are meeting with Michelle when she leans in close and says she has a secret. She asks you to pinky swear that you won't tell anyone. You really want to find out what the secret is, but you also don't want to break Michelle's trust. She leans in to tell you that she is expecting another child and will have to leave her job to prepare for the birth of the new baby. What do you do?
All right, I've got another poll for you. There you go. One question on this one. Do you share the secret or no? All right. So we split the difference there. 1 yes, 1 no. All right. So on this one, I'm going to say that there really is an answer. So some of these especially when we later on we'll get into like poverty versus neglect. There's ways you could argue your case for or against. This one is not as much like that. So first of all, when you go in, and this will be in this next pre-work for session 2, we're going to go into what you can share, what you must share, what you cannot, who you can and cannot share to. We touched on that with the confidentiality, but there's more to it. And something like this is not something that we can keep secret. First of all, there's no expectation of privacy with the information, and we would have made that very clear in that very first visit, that if it is something that is going to affect the case, our job is to gather that information and share it with those in the case. So that's one thing, especially something like this where it's definitely going to affect. Now, when it comes to her being really nervous about getting all 4 children back at once, I have seen many cases where there have been 4 children, or there have been even 3 children, or 5 children, or 6 children. And there are times when all of them will come back at one time. And then there are other times where they will stagger them back. They might take 1 child at a time or 2 children at a time, and then let it sit for a little bit, and then make sure everything's going okay, and then add like the rest of the children in. Typically, they'll do it in 2 groups. So if you have 4 children, they'll do 2 and 2. Sometimes they'll do 1 child at a time if they have a lot of children that have high needs, so that everything can kind of just gently come back. This is even more common if the children are not in the same placement. And when they cannot reintegrate these children at the same time, there is a lot of discussion about how the child that's quote unquote left behind will feel and how they'll deal with that. And a lot of times what they'll do is they'll increase visitation or family time at those points, so that there's a lot more visitation, and be really open or talk about it in therapy, in family therapy, to try and help alleviate any concern so that they don't become another trauma. The other thing I always say about this, and people giggle, but I'm serious, pinky swearing does not hold up in a court of law. There's not one judge that we deal with that would be like, oh, you pinky swore, okay, that's fine. And I worry for the mom in this case, because this is where we really want to advocate for maybe some extra helps for her. How can we make this less overwhelming? How can we make sure that this reintegration is successful? Because the last thing we want to do is reintegrate so fast that she's overwhelmed, and then we end up closing the case, and then it reopens 6 months or 9 months down the line, and then we start the process all over again. Whereas if we just slowed it down and helped with more resources, or helped with in any way that we could to try and soften the change, that would be a much better way for us to progress. And then the case might take a little longer, but it would be more successful in the end. So there you go. All right. So no pinky swearing, people. No pinky swearing.
Well, I saw that and I thought, as soon as that came out of her mouth, you said time out. Whatever you tell me is to being disclosed. So there is no such thing as I can't tell anyone else.
Right. And it's okay if they say to you, man, I'm just really having a bad day. I'm frustrated with my boss. I'm just having a really bad day. Okay, I don't necessarily need to include that in my report. That's not necessarily anything that's germane to the case. Everybody has a bad day. Devontae complains about his boss all the time. But
every day. She's
every
always
day.
in the office. She
I
never
know.
just goes home.
But in all honesty, that's not something that's crucial to the case. But being pregnant and then having to leave your income when it was already not sure if it was going to be able to cover all 4 children, that is very germane to the case. So absolutely, yes. And that's why we're going to build on these foundations of knowledge so we can help determine one way or another. Okay. I don't go click happy, we'll be okay. So I do want to remind you all, I know that there was a lot in there about recognizing child abuse and neglect, and I know I talked about the warning signs and different things like that, but I do want to remind us of a couple of things. There are 4 different kinds of abuse: physical, sexual, emotional, and neglect. Sometimes emotional abuse is called psychological abuse too, so don't think that that's a separate one. That usually is encompassed in the emotional abuse. The big thing I want to remind you is it is not your job to determine whether abuse or neglect has happened or is happening. That is something that the court will officially decide in that hearing we talked about called adjudication. Volunteers, it's really important that you recognize the signs of abuse and neglect and advocate for that safe, permanent home for the child. And then let the court know, or bring in the social worker or anybody else that needs to know if there is further abuse still happening while the case is going on, whether that's by a potential foster family, another child in foster care, a bullying at school, or the parents, or whomever. These children can experience that in a lot of different ways. And so that's something that we want to be able to report to the court. So be mindful of that. Okay, so now we're going to get to the fun part almost. We're going to start working a case. First, I want to talk just briefly again about the court report. This is the absolute most essential part of what you do beyond that mentor relationship with the child. It is the vehicle that you use to present information that you have gathered so that the court can be brought up to date and be aware of everything that is going on. And what I will tell you is I have had judge after judge in public and in private share with me that some of the unique parts of our court report, they really, really are beneficial to the judges in making decisions. They like to get to know the child. They like to hear about what they're doing for activities. They want to know if there's a struggle happening in school or not. They want to get to know that child, if that child loves art, or that child wants to think they're going to be a YouTuber, you know, whatever it is, they want to get to know that child because it helps give them insight when they make their decisions. This is many ways the visible documentation of your involvement in the case, because based on the visits that you've done and everything, you are actually able to make those fact-based recommendations, express concerns, and give those updates. As I said, they absolutely rely on these reports, especially since they are fact-based and they are third party. We are not tied to the system. We don't have to go through, you know, St. Francis can't order certain things or recommend certain things until a certain timeline has gone through, or certain things have to happen before they're allowed to do it. I have had St. Francis caseworkers come to us and say, look, we're still obligated to work reintegration for this case. However, we don't think that it's going to be possible. Is your volunteer advocate thinking the same thing or not? And many times, you know, we recognize the fact that, you know, the parents haven't showed up for 9 months. They haven't shown up to anything, not one appointment with the agency, not a court hearing, nothing. They've never shown up to a visit. They've stayed out of communication. Well, yes, we could go ahead and make the recommendation that the court make a finding of reintegration is no longer a viable option, which is the first step on that journey. Whereas they cannot, because the right amount of time hasn't passed yet. So they really, these third party independent reviews really matter. We are also required to submit court reports for all hearings. And they are due to me 10 business days before every hearing. And part of that is so that I can review it, get back to you if I want to suggest a rewording or a clarification on something, and then I have a deadline to get them to the judge. All right. So there's just the key elements again, and what I'm actually going to do is, it says in really tiny print, Okay. This is what our court reports look like. I know I showed them before, but there are a couple of changes for those of you that are rejoining us for this training. I do want to show you. You'll notice there's a lot of CASA advocate as opposed to CASA. One of the things we need to change is they want us to use CASA advocate or CASA volunteer. Advocate is a little more powerful. The judges prefer that one. The recommendations, you know, this is just a made up court report as an example. So recommends that parental rights be terminated, recommends that the child remain in current out of home placement, remains that CASA advocate recommends that the child be reintegrated with the family, but the case not be closed. Court reports are always written in a third party manner and no pronouns. No pronouns. You can write people's names or you write their relationship to the child. I will tell you, I use a mixture of both. A lot of times I will put, you know, CASA advocate recommends that the mother, and then in parentheses, I'll put her name. Abigail Springsteen have a mental health evaluation, right? Or a mental health assessment. I've used both, but then when I go to my basis, which is the next step, that's where I am writing the reasons why. I might just say the mother because it's quicker, or I might just say Abigail because I've already identified who it is, and I can go back and forth depending, but no pronouns of any kind. And we will, and later on in the training, I'm going to actually show you some actual examples of court reports and where people have used a pronoun and it can get very confusing. And there are attorneys that will take advantage of that, parents attorneys who will take advantage of that because they need to do the best advocacy for their client. And that confusion could help get your court report thrown off the record, which means it can't be considered. And they typically will throw the entire report out, not just that one little section. So things to be mindful of, which is one of the reasons why I always harp on no pronouns. Now, I will also be honest with you. If you forget, like, I don't know, I have on occasion, I've forgotten because you're typing and the pronouns, you're used to writing that way and you're already in the third person. So I say she or her, and I do it too. One of the things is when I'm reviewing your court report, I will put the child or I will put the child's name in there instead. And I don't always go to the volunteer. If they do it, like there's one or maybe two in a court report, I'm not even going to bother them because it's an obvious thing. If they did it every time, there's tons of them in there. Or if they did it consistently on every court report, then I would send that back and say, hey, just want to remind you, no pronouns. Just because. All right. And then, so the basis, remember, these are all fact-based. We don't have any opinion here, and that is always a tough part too. All right. The reason for removal, and if we don't have a removal, in fact, I might just do this. The reason for removal or the case. And the reason why I do that is sometimes the children are not removed from the home, but we want to know why the case began. It might be a truancy case, right? And we don't typically remove children for a truancy case, but that's what it was. So you could put a sentence in here, the child had, 27 unexcused absences during the first quarter. That's a truancy case. It's more than a truancy case. There's obviously some issues going on. That's what started the case. Next section, the child's development physically, emotionally, and academically. We always want updates. The judge loves fresh information here each time. And they wanted to hear, how are they doing in school? What are they doing for activities? How are they doing overall? Are they going to therapy on a regular basis? How are they doing in therapy? anything that you can share, this is where you could put all that stuff. They love art, or they are looking forward to going on a Boy Scout camping trip, or whatever it is. The judges really appreciate that kind of personalized information. If you have more than one child, you'll do one paragraph per child and just separate them out. The child's wishes, this is what they would want for the case. It doesn't have to be in regard to where they live. It can be in regard to anything that has to do with the case. There is a time where you have to decide if they're too young to express this. And so, and we're going to talk a little bit about how to ask this question without it being a leading question in the pre-work for next week. But I would urge you to consider, are they really of the age where this is a question we want to ask? If not, we just typically put they are too young to share their wishes. And then sometimes you'll have an older child, or you'll have a child who is old enough, but what they want isn't really in their best interest. So here's where we will express what they told us they wanted and what they wanted to share with the judge here. And then we add a sentence on the end. However, however, this is not in the child's best interest at this time. Just so that they're really clear that what they want isn't reasonable. Parents' progress on achieving reintegration. Parents' progress on achieving, the other thing we could put here is case plan. If only I had my fingers on the right ones. Plan. Tasks. So they're given those list of tasks of things that they have to accomplish. How are they doing with that? We always want to try and have something positive to say. However, if they've had no contact, or if they haven't made progress, then we do need to include that here. You know, maybe they haven't made any progress, but they have stayed in contact with you. We can at least put that positive in there, because we're going to want to try. A lot of the judges like to try and praise their positive efforts, even while having to yell at them figuratively for not completing the case plan tasks or making progress. The other thing here is the CASA advocate concerns. This is not mandatory. You don't have to have a concern. However, many of our advocates end up having a concern here or there. This is about the only place you can kind of put that opinion in. CASA advocate is concerned that the child does not value school right now. You know, and this is a crucial time for them to take their SATs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, or to make decisions about their future. Or you know, I'm kind of making it up here as I go, but like, if there's a concern, I once had a concern, and we'll actually see it in just a second. I'm actually going to show you a training court report. And there. So this is an actual court report that I had for a case. You can tell that the case started in 2016. I didn't fix that. I didn't take that off. But what I did do is I changed all the information. So you'll see that the names have all been changed. Places have been changed. The date. The hearing September 31st. There is no 31st day of September. So obviously, you know, I'm taking some leeway here to kind of keep everything confidential, but this is an actual court report that I have done. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it like this, and I'm going to give you a minute to read it. If you'll just let me know when you're done, I can scroll down to the next page. Man, I am correcting my mistakes here. I told you, I do it too.
It's hard to read when the words disappear in front of me.
Sorry.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, I apologize. You see lots of pronouns in there. I'm gonna have to finish fixing that. I had a concern. That's why I added it on the end. She was getting so much visitation. So here's the thing. I changed names. I changed dates, made up a lot of dates that don't exist. However, I didn't make up anything in the report. This was my actual report. This actually happened. There is no Last Chance Rehab. That's not the name of the rehabilitation center in Kansas, but this is what an actual court report looked like. Now, one of the things that you may see in here is the picture, and I can tell you that the judges are more and more and more really wanting pictures of the children, especially if the picture of you and the child or something like that. Now, one of the reasons why we like also adding pictures of the child here is that it helps everybody see that there's some progression of time, because when you start to where you are now, there might be some time in between, especially babies, they change so much. So it's always important to throw a picture in there. You don't have to do it every time. The judges would love it if you did, but you don't have to. Oh, okay. We're going to go back to here and put my screen up. So that's kind of how we do court reports. Now, if I can get my screen to cooperate, this is why I have to have two screens. What we're going to talk about now are case studies, and this is where we're going to spend the bulk of our interactive time. This one's a little bit different. It's the first week. It's always going to be the least interactive. By the time we get to the last week, I won't have to say very much, which is good because I've already had to say it all before. But what are case studies? And this is something, Doug, you and I did not have to do. These are actual cases that have existed. Now, there's two different kinds of case studies that we will be dealing with. We will have the National CASA case studies, and they will have a new one each week where you will read some material in advance. This is something that I would attach to the email potentially and say, hey, print this or don't print this, or print this document and then put it aside, or save this document, but don't look at it until we get to this interactive session. And those are designed to highlight a lot of the things that we're talking about each week. However, we were also going to be doing one case study, and we're going to follow very closely a case, and then it's a series of videos that was done by Texas CASA. And I really love this one. In fact, I did integrate this into some trainings way back then because it has been so helpful. So we'll have the National CASA one. There'll be a new one each week that we will kind of talk about. And then there will be one that we follow kind of throughout the whole training. So what will we be doing with them? Well, the National CASA NGAL studies, a lot of that is who do we talk to? What are we asking? Kind of getting through the step-by-steps of how we do things, learning about different things that we can do and investigate. And a lot of times there's a lot of cultural aspects that we're not always aware of that we can really dig into on these. And then again, the Texas case study, what I want us to learn is I want us to see more of a case all the way through as it happens, because you start to understand more about what visits could look like, as well as how shall I put this? As well as seeing much more effectively than when we do just in the printed word. The dramatization really helps you hone some of those skills of observation for nonverbal cues and different things like that. And so that's going to be helpful when you go in and you're interacting with people and you can see how things have worked out one way or another. So these case studies are from a great period of time ago. The ones that National CASA did, they picked from all over the country, but they did it prior to 2017 when this curriculum came out. Well, actually, this curriculum came out in 2017, 2018. And some of the laws have changed, like the federal Family First legislation wasn't in place. There's been 2 changes to the ICWA laws since then. There have been other law changes since these have come out. So they're still helpful because we're digging into cultural aspects. We're digging into, there's a lot more that we'll do with kind of like older adults or older children in the system, and immigration issues we'll talk about at one point, and different things like that. So they still have validity, and the storylines are still the same. It's just that we can now talk about them a little bit more in depth and compared to, okay, so now because of federal Family First, we have this, because of this law, we have now this, and it actually provides a really good training, even though they don't have the most up-to-date ones. I do know National CASA is working on that. They're looking at a new curriculum sometime in the next 2 or 3 years. So there you go. All right, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to watch 2 videos. I'm going to pop in and out. This first one, I'm not going to interrupt it at all. It's literally 1 minute and 30 seconds. However, what we're going to watch is what actually happens at the beginning of a child needed care case when it's going before the judge to see if it's actually going to be a child needed care case or not. So the DCF has investigated it. They think that there's some reasons why potentially they need to remove the children, or that there should be a case. The county attorney's office has completed, with the help of DCF, a petition, and they're going before the judge in that ex parte, what's called an ex parte hearing. Now, what I will tell you is a couple of different things. I will stop you periodically during these Texas videos to say, hey, this is Texas, but here's how it is in Kansas. Kansas has just not produced one. We should put that on Devontae's to-do list, produce a major film thing, you know. So he's got plenty of time. He's got plenty of time. But in all seriousness, typically we don't have an actual hearing. We would have that police protective custody hearing, or this is all done through emails and electronically, kind of conversations via email, so to speak. They would come up, they would submit the petition and the ex parte order for the judge to approve or not approve. DCF does not testify like this gentleman is about to. That typically comes in a DCF report for us. But it's important for you to kind of see some of the things that the judge is judging at the beginning of a case. So enough said with that. Now, what I will tell you is if you see his lips moving and you don't hear anything, like wave your hand or do something to let me know, because the volume should work.
Good morning, Judge. This is Investigator Bob Johnson, and he has a new removal to present to you this morning.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. It's nice to meet you. All right. So this is the same affidavit that you faxed in previously?
Yes,
Is that correct? All right. Why don't you tell me about the location of the children, where they're placed at this time?
Ben and Robert are placed currently at a shelter. Baby Rose is placed in a foster home.
All right. And have you been looking into placements, relative placements for the children?
Yes, we have.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and appoint Ms. Duke as the attorney and guardian for all the children in this case, and looked like appointment of attorneys for parents would be appropriate as well. And while I'm doing that, why don't you tell me about school issues with the kids and their medications, things such as that?
Ben and Robert will be going to the same school. The shelter will be transporting to that school. Ben will be following up with the doctor for his asthma condition, and all the children will be receiving medical and dentals and eye exams.
All right, so I got the setting for the next hearing in the order here. Ms. Richard, if you'll go ahead and make sure that process gets served to all the parties.
Yes, sir.
Then we'll see you in a couple of days. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, a couple of things about that. Just to say, again, that's usually done by paperwork. They were removing the children for this case. The other thing is you're gonna hear, like, this is the very beginning of the case, day one of the case. One of the things that you need to understand is in Texas, they have different laws and they have different dates. So we have to have a temporary custody hearing within 72 business hours. And then we have to have an adjudication, that evidentiary hearing that I talked about, within 30 business days. Now, there can be delays and different things like that. However, in Texas, that's going to be a little different. And one of the things that is, I go to the next one, I would urge you to keep in mind a couple of things. The judge is a real judge who handles child in need of care cases or their equivalent in Texas. The attorneys are all really attorneys who volunteered to help partner with Texas CASA to make these videos. Some of the players are actors, okay? And some of them are just, they volunteered to help make the production, but some of them are professional actors. I would say, by best guess, that the mom in this case is a professional actress, because when we get to this hearing, you're going to see mom acting in a very specific way, and I will tell you, she is spot on. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. I will be stopping this one several times. A couple of things. Texas laws are, one of the laws that's different in the state of Texas is they have 365 days, and that's it, to settle this child in need of care case. If you're dealing with a parent that's dealing with addiction, and then they are having to go to rehab, if they delay too long, there could be a possibility that the case will close before they get to that 365 days. So they are very mindful of time in Texas, whereas in Kansas, we don't have that drop dead date. The case has to be done or we're terminating parental rights. But we do have a statute that says that if the child is out of home placement for 15 of the last 22 months, although usually they add some extra time in there, and it's usually like 17 of the last 22 months in out of home placement, there is a presumption of unfitness on the part of the parents because they haven't been able to reintegrate in that amount of time. Now, this hearing that we're going to watch is what they call an adversary hearing, but it's actually what we would call that adjudication. This is where they're going to determine whether or not these children are in fact a child in need of care. Any questions before I hit the play? All right.
This is the 262 hearing, which means it has to happen 14 days after you got the paperwork.
Right through here.
Okay.
It's okay.
So what we're going to do is it's like a mini trial where we're asking the judge to keep the kids with you, not take them away and give them to CPS.
So I'm basically guilty before proven innocent?
No.
Is that how the
it's-
system works now? If there is any faith in the court system whatsoever in this universe, then I think that everything will be fine because I am innocent.
Okay. We're going to go in there. We're going to have a hearing. The judge is going to make orders about probably services, things like drug testing or classes that you can do. And you're going to get assigned a CPS caseworker, and you may get assigned something called a CASA advocate who's going to work with you and your family. And the whole reason for this is to put the kids back with you and make sure they'll be safe. When they call us in, let me do as much talking as possible. They may put you on the stand. Are you looking at me? They may put you on the stand. I want you to listen carefully to any questions that are asked.
Do you have something to say? She's listening to our conversation. Is that legal?
It's okay. What we're going to do is when they call us, we're going to go in there and I will do most of the talking. And if you don't know the answer, say, I don't know. If you have a
Okay.
question,
Okay.
say you need to ask your attorney a question,
Okay.
okay?
Hi, Bob.
Hey,
My supervisor tells me I'm getting this case.
you are, right. There's 3 children
Okay.
involved. Ben, who's 14.
Okay, so the gentleman would be DCF, and the lady that he's talking to would be our equivalent of the social worker from St. Francis, who would be the caseworker on the case. You just saw a conversation between mom and her attorney, just so that everybody's.
Robert, who's 9, and little Rose, who's 9 months. Mom had left these children home alone at the apartment, and she was arrested for stealing formula. There's some drinking and drugging issues with mom, and she has a lengthy history with CPS. Ben has asthma, and that wasn't medically treated. There's a suspicion that Rose has was exposed to alcohol prenatally, and both Ben and Robert are behind in school. So we have Ben and Robert in a shelter. Rose is in a foster home right now.
Is that a legal risk home or is
No,
it?
that's not.
It's a regular
Right.
foster home, okay.
That's correct. Ben and Robert are going to the same school that they used to. Now, Ben has been treated the day after the removal for his asthma, so that's improving.
Okay.
But he still needs dental and eye exams. He's also missing his dog, and that's very important to him. And he thinks the neighbor has him.
Okay.
He's
What's
missing.
the dog's name?
Ralph is a.
Hey, guys.
How are you?
Good. Who's Ralph?
Ralph is Ben's dog.
Okay.
And he misses him terribly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who has the dog now?
We believe a neighbor has that, and we're going to check.
Okay. So are you handing the case off after this hearing?
This is going to go to Teresa.
Yes. Hi, I'm Teresa.
Lori Duke.
I'm gonna
Nice
be
to
the
meet you.
conservatorship worker. I'm Barbie Ott with CASA.
Nice
to meet you, Barbie. And what do y'all know about the case?
I've spoken with Ben. My biggest concern is I think I'm going to need a CASA.
Okay, so she says it's a conservative worker. She's actually what we would call a guardian ad litem here, FYI. And then that would be the CASA director there. They don't have the volunteer assigned yet.
He's 14. He's pretty clear on what he wants and doesn't want. And as most teenagers go, his best interest, his legal interest will probably conflict at some point. So I'm going to be asking for CASA to be appointed.
I agree. Any information about fathers involved?
Right, so there's 2 fathers that we know of, and one is Justin Harris, who is not involved. He has been involved with Ben's life.
Okay.
That's Ben's father. Robert's dad is Ernie Price, and he's involved and he wants Robert. He lives with his mom, and so Ernie has been to Iraq,
Okay.
and he's come back. He has had several deployments. He has PTSD and some medical issues as a result of the war. So he lives with his mom, and we're going to do a home study on them.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. At this time, the court is going to call cause number 67432 in the 499th Judicial District Court of San Gabriel County, Texas. This case is styled in the interest of the Harris Price children. We do have several persons present in the courtroom here at this particular time. Let me introduce them and announce who they are for them. On my left here, first of all, we have our attorney ad litem representing the children, Ms. Duke. Next to her, we have Mr. Bob Johnson, our investigator, a caseworker from the department. Next to him is our county attorney representing CPS as their attorney, Mr. Britton. Over on my right, we have the mother's attorney, Ms. Langsley, is here with us today. Next to her is the mother in the case, Ms. Price. Good morning, Ms. Price. The court has appointed an attorney to represent the father, Mr. Harris, who has not been served at this particular time. That attorney is Ms. Sparks. She is present with us this morning. Thank you for your acceptance of this appointment, Ms. Sparks. Next to her is Mr. Childress, who's an attorney who's been appointed to represent Robert's father. Mr. Childress is here. We appreciate his time with us today. Next to Mr. Childress is the father, Ernie Price, Robert's father. And I believe this is his mother, Miss Dashie. Is that correct? Next to him. Thank you for being here with us this morning, ma'am. Now, I believe we have other persons from the department, the agency in the audience, as well as CASA in the audience at this particular time. And so those are the persons that we do have present. We are here today for our adversary hearing. My understanding is that there's no agreement in this particular case as to temporary orders. So we will be proceeding with our adversary hearing here in a moment. Thank you for already identifying with the court that service issues have been completed with regards to the two parents who are present. I know we're continuing to seek service on your client, Ms. Sparks, and we may address that later. As we know, paternity has been established, I believe, previously for the older two children, and so we know that Mr. Price is in fact the legal father at this time of the child Robert. We know that previously a court has adjudicated Mr. Harris as the father of the older child, Ben, so that issue has been resolved. We do know that we have an unknown father. That's my understanding. We have an unknown father alleged for baby Rose, and we'll address those issues momentarily. Those are the issues that the court sees as preliminary issues. I believe all those issues have been resolved at this particular time. We've identified who's here, and I believe at this point we're ready for evidence from the agency. So, Mr. Britton, do you have a witness to call at this time?
Yes, Your Honor. We would call the children's mother, Kathy Price.
All right, Ms. Price, would you scoot out, please, and come have a seat right up here? Thank you, Ms. Price. Will you please raise your right hand to be sworn at this time? Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony that you give before this court today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right, thank you. Will you please have a seat? Now, will you please state your name for the court?
Kathy Price.
Thank you, Ms. Price. Mr. Britton, do you have questions for this witness at this time?
Yes, Your Honor. Would you state your name for the record?
Kathy Price.
Ms. Price, do you understand that everything that you say is being recorded today?
Yes, thank you.
And you are the mother of 3 children, Rose, Robert, and Ben, is that correct?
That's right.
Ms. Price, are you okay?
I'm fine. How are you?
Good. Have you ever been in a courtroom before?
Yeah.
Objection relevance?
Relevant?
Overruled. Go ahead.
Do you know why we're here today?
Yeah. Because baby formula is too damn expensive. That's why we're here today.
All right, Ms. Price, let me interrupt for a second. Ms. Price, remember that it's important. We're in a court of law, and you need to watch your language, and please don't curse in our courtroom. Will you do that for me, please?
Now that I know that damn is a curse word, I will not say it.
Thank you. Mr. Britton, do you have any other questions for this witness?
Just a few, Judge. Ernie Price is the father of Robert, is that correct?
Yeah.
And Robert's 9 years old?
Yeah.
Now, my understanding is that Mr. Price has actually been out of the country for some period of time, and during that time, Robert was living with you.
Yes.
You also have a 9-month-old baby named Rose. Is that correct? Now, tell me, who is Rose's father?
I was hoping you could tell me.
Do you not know, or do you not want to tell us?
No, I don't know.
Do you remember the names of the men that you would have been intimate with?
No.
Would that have been because of your substance abuse?
Objection calls for speculation and
Overruled.
assumes facts not in evidence.
You want to ask another question, Mr. Britton?
Do you have an explanation as to why you don't know who the father is?
No.
Are there multiple possible fathers?
I think it works that there's only one. I think that's how it works. I really want to move on.
Ms. Price, do you understand how important it is at this point in the process for this court to understand who the father is? Do you understand why I'm asking those questions?
No, because I've been fine this whole time.
Do you understand that?
I've been fine. I've worked it out.
Okay. Do you understand that, much like you were served with papers, the father of each of your children, each of your 3 children, also needs to be served with papers? Do you understand that?
No, I did not know that.
And that this court is going to have to determine who the father of Rose is, so they will know who to serve papers. That's why I'm asking those questions.
Right.
Okay. Well, in the future, if you happen to remember who the father of Rose is, could you notify somebody at CPS?
Sure thing.
Okay. Now, the events of the night that led to the removal of your 3 children, that's what I want to talk about next. Do you remember that night?
I sure do.
Okay. Do you remember what you were doing when CPS came to your home and removed your children?
Yeah.
Okay, where were you? Tell the court where you were actually while your children were being taken from your home.
I was in jail.
And tell the court who is home supervising your 3 children while you were in jail.
My 14-year-old was watching.
Okay, I'm gonna pause right here for a second. 14 would not be a problem here in Kansas. They could watch their younger siblings for a short period of time. However, in this case, you'll hear later, she was actually in court overnight, and that is too long for a 14-year-old to take care of younger siblings. Every state is different, but I wanted to make sure that everybody was aware. She was in jail overnight on this, and she did not tell them that she had children at home.
At the
My
time,
9-year-old and 9-month-old.
I'm sorry. At the time your children were removed, how long had you been gone from the home?
At the time, they were. Look, all I know is that I went out to go get baby formula, and then I come back from jail, which I didn't even want to go to, and then they took my kids.
Okay. So
That's all I know. I don't know how much time it was. They don't give you a clock in jail.
So you leave your children home, your 3 children home alone, to go get baby formula, correct?
Yeah, it was supposed to be a short amount of time. It's right down the street.
And then you leave the home and go to a store that sells baby formula.
Well, we were out of baby formula and we were out of vodka, so I went in the vodka store is before the baby formula store, so I went there first.
How can I help you?
I want what's that one that's called like a kamikaze?
You mean Kamchatka?
Show me, which one is that?
It's I'm assuming this is what you're talking about, right? You want vodka?
Yes.
How much is the big one?
Big one's $4.99.
Total? What's
With tax of
540.
All right, I want the bigger one.
All right.
Uh-oh.
You got it all there?
I'm sure I do. I don't know if I can do this anymore. I just wish that I could do more. It is so hard. I gotta go get baby formula.
And so you left your home, you left your 3 kids home alone and went to the liquor store to get vodka, correct?
I stopped by on the way. It's right on the way.
And then after you
3
stopped
minutes.
at the liquor store to get vodka, then you went to the baby formula store? Or the store that sells baby formula?
Yes.
Did she pay for that?
No.
Ma'am. Ma'am, stop. Put your hands behind your back.
And you shoplifted formula and got arrested?
Yeah.
Okay. Your Honor, we have no additional questions. I pass the witness.
Thank you. Ms. Langsley, do you have any questions then for your client?
Yes, Judge, may I proceed?
You may.
Ms. Price, you're the mother of 3 children, right?
Yes.
And throughout their lives, who was the primary parent for those children?
I am.
So you've been the person who's been doing the most caretaking for these kids, right?
Absolutely.
Did you get any help from their fathers?
Rarely.
So who's been providing all of their food?
We get by. I figured it out.
Who's been making sure that they get to school?
I do. Wake up at 5 a.m., make sure baby Rose is okay. And then I get my boys ready for school, and I get them dressed, and then I have to go to work, and then do it all over again the next day.
Who's been making sure that the kids go to the doctor when they need to go?
I do.
Now, when you went out the other night, you were attempting to get something for your daughter, is that correct?
That's right.
It was not your intention to be arrested?
No, ma'am.
And your oldest son is how old?
He's 14.
Has he been a help with his younger brother and sister?
Huge help.
And
He's amazing.
Okay. And is he very bonded to them?
We're really close.
And
We've been through a lot together, and we're really close, so we help each other out, and we figure it out. And we're fine.
And how do his brother and sister feel about him?
Oh,
how do Robert and Rose feel about their brother Ben?
well, I don't know about Rose. She's only 9 months, but she seems to like him. And Robert and Ben get along really well. They're brothers. They look after each other, and Rose is on the right path to getting looked after.
So
as a
would it
family.
be, I'm sorry to interrupt you, so would it be fair to say that even though you haven't had any assistance from the kids' dads, you guys were doing okay as a family unit? Right?
Yeah.
And you love your children?
Yeah.
Have you ever been separated from them before?
No.
How do you think they're going to do without you?
I don't know.
Can you reassure the court today that if the kids go home with you, they'll be safe?
if the kids go home with me today, they will be safe. And they'll be happy. And we will get along as a family just fine.
And you'd be willing to work with the department to ensure that they were safe with you in your home?
Yes, we will work with the department.
Pass witness, Judge.
All right, thank you. Do you have another witness then at this time, Mr. Britton?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, we're going to call Bob Johnson.
Ms. Price, you're free to step down and sit back by your attorney at this time. Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony that you give before this court today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. If you'll please have a seat. If you'll please state your name for the record at this time.
Bob Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Britton. If you have questions, you may proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Johnson, how are you currently employed?
Work with CPS as investigator.
And so as calls come into the hotline of suspected abuse and neglect, it's your job to investigate those?
Correct.
Mr. Johnson, sometime in the last couple of weeks, did you conduct an investigation on Ms. Price's home?
I did.
And if you could just briefly tell the court what you discovered at that home.
Sure. We received a referral in regard to 3 children left home alone.
I'm calling about apartment 202 again. Yes, I've called a lot. And she's done it again. She left in the middle of the night and she hasn't come back. And I can hear the baby crying. I know those kids aren't going to school.
San Gabriel Sheriff's Office.
And you guys need to come by here and take care of these kids.
I went to an apartment with Officer Gooden and discovered 3 children, ages 14, 9, and 9 months, left alone without the care of their mother.
If you could briefly discuss the condition of the home.
The children were in distress at the time. The home was in disarray. Hi, Ben, Robert. I'm Bob Johnson. I work with Child Protective Service. What I do is I go around, I talk with boys and girls such as yourself, and I make sure that you're safe. Okay? When's the last time that you saw your mom?
Last night. She went out to get some formula and haven't seen her since.
She never came back?
No.
Well, I can take you to a safe place, and we can try to find your mom, okay?
During your investigation, did you discover where the mother was?
Yeah, she was in jail.
What was she in jail for?
She was in jail for theft.
Do you know how long she'd been in jail?
One night.
Lift your fingers. I need your thumb. And relax your hand.
Ms. Price? My name is Bob Johnson. I work with Child Protective Services. I was involved in going to your home today and saw your children. And we had
Are they
some-
okay?
Well, they're okay now. We had to take custody of them.
You took my kids?
We had to take custody of your children. There was no one there to provide for them. Is there any information that you can give me where your children can go?
Maybe they can go to my sister's.
Okay. Do you have a name?
Don't you have my papers?
We can
Don't
look
you
at
know
the
everything
history.
about me that I don't even know?
But
Her
Miss
name is
Price-
Carol.
Okay, Carol.
And we've heard Ms. Price discuss the relationships in the fathers. Have you begun the process of identifying any possible relative placements?
I have. There's a maternal aunt, Carol Hill. And there's also a paternal grandmother who is the grandmother of Robert, Anita Dashe.
Okay. Now, that would be Mr. Price's, Ernie Price's mother, is that
Correct.
correct? Now, why are you not exploring the possibility of Mr. Price as a possible placement?
Mr. Price actually lives with his mother at this time.
Okay. Will the department begin the home study process on that home?
Yes.
I believe I'll pass the witness at this time, Judge.
Thank you. Ms. Linksley, do you have any questions then for Mr. Johnson at this time?
I do, Judge. May I proceed?
You may.
Mr. Johnson, you said that my client was in jail with an allegation of theft. Do you know what she was alleged to have taken?
She had stolen some baby formula
Anything else?
No, ma'am.
Do you know what the circumstances were regarding the baby formula?
My understanding is that she did not have any money for the baby formula, that she had spent the money on vodka.
That was what someone else told you. You did not know that of your own accord. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so we're gonna approach this one. It was a little long on today's, I know, because they go through the whole hearing. It won't be that long next time, but you kind of see how we're setting this up, how the case starts, how it's progressing. In this case, the judge will keep the children out of home placement, and we're gonna kind of progress on as if we're the volunteer on that. One of the things that I would like you to do, though, is be looking in tomorrow for your email. First thing tomorrow morning, actually probably second thing tomorrow morning, I will be sending out next week's job form. And that will be all the work to do. And I'm going to make sure that when it gets sent out, your week gets saved, your work gets saved, so you can kind of come back to it over the week. Does anybody have any questions? I know we just listened to a lot of video and that's it. We're going to do more with that starting next week, but this needed to set the scene. This is kind of like reading the basic history of the case. We've moved in and now we're going to start to take our training and have it line up with the video. All right. Well, no, if there aren't any questions, then I will say thanks for coming and sticking with me, and we will see you all next week.
I'll see you in the morning, Lisa.
All right, Devontae, we'll see you then.
You too.